Hey, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival, and an arts writer for Georgia Voice. I am so honored today to have with us a legend, a writer, producer, and showrunner for shows such as the English version of Queer as Folk, the American version of Queer as Folk, A Very English Scandal, and Doctor Who. He's back now with an extraordinary new series called It's a Sin, which premieres on HBO Max February the 18th. It's the story of four young friends in England at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. Please welcome the creator and writer of It's a Sin, Russell T. Davis.
Hello, Jim. Thank you for having me. That's
Thank you
lovely.
so much for talking to us today. My husband and I absolutely binged this series. We watched it over 2 nights. It's extraordinary. So thank you so much
Oh,
for doing
that's
this.
hard going. Are you all right? Did you survive?
We did survive. It's just so
Tough.
well done. You know, yeah.
Oh,
Well, how
thank
did
you. It's astonishing.
yeah.
Sorry.
How did this come up for you?
Well, it's kind of like, I suppose I was building up to this all my life in a way. I was like the characters in the series. I was 18 in
Hmm.
1981. I left home. My friends left home. I literally had a friend called Jill, like the character Jill, who left home and went to London and lived in a
Hmm.
flat full of gay men and gay friends. And she called it the Pink Palace. And there are parties all week. And then the 80s progressed. And so the HIV virus appeared and life started to change. That's literally her life. But so in many ways, and I was simultaneously growing up elsewhere. So I've been heading towards it all these years, really, I suppose. I can remember the first conversation where someone said, I was talking about this, and someone said, oh, that would be a good drama. That's 1995, I
Wow.
remember. So there we are. You get there in the end. If there are people out there cherishing and nursing scripts and ideas that have been in their heads for a long time, it can get there in the end, I promise you.
One of the things that struck me, when I was growing up in the US, AIDS was something that came out. We were all a little confused about it, but eventually we learned more about it. But I mean, I never really thought about what it was like to be outside of the US. I mean, for you, what was it like? When did you first hear about AIDS, and how did you go about getting more information about it?
Yeah, that it's those days without the internet, without mobile
Exactly.
phones, without
Yeah.
anything. It's hard to imagine.
Yes.
It's imagine it. A younger audience is watching It's a Sin kind of amazed, and because
Hmm.
it's a very familiar world.
Yeah.
Although this is technically a period drama, you're watching young people in jeans going to bars, having drinks, hooking up, and spending Sunday mornings together. It's a very familiar world, but with no information. It's hard to imagine a world where if you left London, you just vanish. You just disappear. You have to write a letter to people. It's astonishing. So yeah, that's been a big that's kind of like helped me shape the drama in that sense. What
Hmm.
were we talking about? Why do we ask that? What was your question? I
We were
can't remember.
talking about the fact that, for a lot of people outside of the United States,
Oh
there
yeah.
was no way to find out more information about AIDS.
Yeah. And there were great activists trying to spread the word. It's funny. I think the first you hear whispers back then. You hear rumors.
Yeah.
It would be talked of as a gay plague. It would be talked of as American in 1982, 1983, 1984. People were saying, "Don't sleep with Americans," as though that was a way of escaping this. Isn't that strange?
Yes.
It was seen as this distant, strange thing, and it's partly why I put all that into It's a Sin. And yeah, so the very first time I ever took it seriously, I remember, is it was the June 1983, and I was a student at Oxford, and I bought a magazine called Him magazine, and Him magazine was just full of naked men and personal ads and fun. It wasn't a porn magazine. But it was a fun, a little bit of news, a little bit of politics, mostly naked men. And I bought that, and I walked down the street. It was on Juxon Street in Oxford, and I stopped dead in the street because the cover was a cover with a test tube full of naked boiling men. It was a drawing, piece of artwork by a man called Oliver Frey, boiling men in a test tube with a strap line across it saying AIDS, death plot, panic. You glimpsed that in episode 2 of It's a Sin. We actually found the cover and put it on screen.
Okay.
And that was the first time I went, oh, it's real. It's absolutely serious. It's real. And, as you say, a lot of our culture is so dominantly American that I thought the British story hadn't been told. You've had such ferocious, brilliant pieces of work. There's Angels in America, there's Normal Hearts, there's, even characters like Jeannie in ER having being HIV positive for all those years. Great pieces. And so I felt there was room to say Pose. Pose is the most magnificent piece of work. But I felt that allowed me room to say, actually, here in London, in Britain, it was slightly different. It was, here's our take on things. And
Yes.
anything to add to the picture, really, as long as you can enrich that picture. If we can all see every country and with all our different experiences, we'll begin to see the world. So, yeah, I wanted to add to that.
Yeah. You mentioned that this was a long time in coming, but why do you think now is the right time to tell these stories?
Well, it's a funny one, because I get asked that a lot, but my whole career, like any career, it's just a load of bumps and accidents, really. It's like I was derailed for about 10 years by Doctor Who. I worked on Doctor Who, which I loved, but I wasn't planning to spend that long working on something. So if it wasn't for that, we'd be sitting here in 2011 talking about this. So it's strange. It's I can see my work heading towards it for a long time when I created Queer as Folk, because I did the original Queer as Folk here in Britain. And that, for example, and that was 1998, that very deliberately had no references to HIV or AIDS in it at all, because at the time then, we were being completely defined by an illness in the way that straight people never were. You wouldn't watch a straight drama demanding, where's the cancer? No one would ever do that. So that's a very deliberate reaction against it. I thought the American Queer as Folk then did a brilliant job at actually taking one of the older characters from mine and making him HIV positive. They told a very great story in which he'd thought he was going to die and had spent all his money, and then the antiretroviral drugs came along. So suddenly he was going to live, but his money was gone. And so he was having to live with Debbie. I thought it was a really clever story. I loved that story. So there's always been these great stories there. So my work was kind of heading towards it. There is no why now in the end. And who would have thought that the now would be a pandemic? You read about a virus. Here we are living in the middle of a virus. So it's all a whole bunch of accidents. It seems to have worked for once this time, but you never really control these things. I think when people give interviews saying how they planned it and no one knew where they were heading, I think that's a lie. It's like saying an actor saying, I was determined to get this part. It's like, you were just lucky, love.
This series, Neil Patrick Harris is in this, Stephen Fry's in. There's some recognizable faces, but the heavy lifting is done by this extraordinary group of young actors who a lot of us aren't familiar with. Can you talk a little bit about finding this wonderful ensemble?
Thank you for saying that, because we had the backup. You've got to raise money for these programs. You've got to go to production companies and financiers, and that's what Neil Patrick Harris, as well as talent and gorgeousness, but Stephen Fry, Keely Hawes as well, who's I think The Bodyguard was very big over there. She's a British icon, Keely Hawes. So having them there is brilliant. But as you say, the spotlight is on the young cast. That's hard. That's a hard ask for a drama. And much to our surprise, it's turned into our greatest success. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, because they're lovely and they're brilliant. But you can plan that all you like and not have it work. So I got a great casting director called Andy Pryor, who was a brilliant man. He's cast all the Doctor Who's of the 21st century. He's very, very brilliant, and I've done everything with him. And so he knows, he goes out and looks for talent. He finds that, for example, that Callum, who plays Colin, who everyone adores in this, he's become such a star. He was still in college. He was at Welsh College. He was in drama college. He was still studying. And he would spend a week with us, and then he'd go back to college and then come back with us. He was living an amazing life, and he's turned out to be an absolute superstar. People adore him. So I can't take the credit for that. I mean, we spotted him in the audition, but it's Andy who goes out and finds the raw talent and says, come here, come and audition. So you work with people you trust in the end, and for once it's paid off. It doesn't always pay off. I've had plenty of disasters that no one's ever heard of. There are plenty of things you didn't list in your introduction. Those forgotten shows, God bless them. But this has worked, and we're so delighted. Yeah,
it's so very good. The characters are so well done. I was so. Can you talk about Lydia? I was so. I mean, I was impressed by everybody, but the character of Lydia has such an arc. Can you talk a little bit about that character and the way she grows from the first episode to just being such a caretaker and it's sort of a den mother to everybody toward the end?
Yeah, she's just one of them. Jill, she's called Lydia, the actress. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's like they're almost inseparable, aren't they? It's like, and that's written from the heart, because I had a friend called Jill who went to London in the 1980s, lived in a flat, did all these things, and I based it so closely on Jill that I couldn't even change her name. I think I should have. I literally sat at this desk thinking I should call her Sarah, I should call her Susan, I should call her Janet. I just couldn't. She was so Jill, and yet not like Jill at the same time. The fictional Jill and we then, I don't know if you know, I then got real Jill to play fictional Jill's mother on screen, which is lovely. It's
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, that the woman who plays the mum is real life Jill, which is such a lovely gift to do, and such a nice thing to do for my friend Jill. So yeah, so it was based on someone real. Nonetheless, I also invented her. It's not literally Jill's life, and I was very aware of writing a series that's about men. It's about gay men. The lead roles are gay men. So I think it's your job in 2021 to balance that. That's why actually amongst the parents, the mothers tend to have stronger voices than the fathers. Some lovely actors in there playing with some great portrayals of fathers, but actually the mothers become more important, partly because I think that's probably true of most households. They're actually the ones deciding what are going on, but actually to balance it, it's like you've got to get the women on screen, and then you cast it like that, and you just get lucky. You get cast Lydia West, who I'd worked with before. I did a series called Years and Years, in which is on HBO as well. That's I'd worked with her on that and loved her. And you don't always cast someone you've worked with before in your next show. Sometimes that's quite an odd thing to do. You often go looking for someone new, but on this it was just irresistible. She did one. We auditioned her. She did one reading, and it was like, that's it. So love her. Yeah.
It's a great story. As we're dealing with COVID right now, it's just so ironic because these days we're dealing with, it reminds me so much of those early days of the AIDS crisis, when you didn't really know what you could do or where you could go or who could be around. It just really reminded me so much of those early days.
It's amazing. And this was all, we finished filming in January 2020, so the pandemic hadn't arrived. And yeah, it was all, and then we spent the year editing it, and of course we've got scenes of PPE and false facts and denial and distancing and isolation, and we see the characters inventing all that. So that was strange. It's nothing more than an accident, and I worried it would look opportunistic. I kind of, during post-production and during the release of this, before the transmission, we were kind of worrying, thinking, does this look like we've taken advantage? Does this look like we've leapt on a current situation and used it? But fortunately, it seems to have been received in the right tone of voice, which is just a coincidence. Nonetheless, with a lot to say, I think as a gay man alive now, it's very strange when you hear people of our age talking about this virus as though it's the first time it's ever happened. I find that very puzzling. It's like you literally sit there going, no, we've had a virus. Hello. Well, we've all had a virus. That wasn't a gay virus. It affected everyone. And so isn't it strange? Our capacity to forget and our capacity for the government to let us down is exactly the same every time.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you as a gay man about the legacy of both versions of Queer as Folk. Can you just talk a little bit about why Queer Folk was just so important?
Well, I was just lucky. I was lucky the one I got to write it. It's I kind of think it was 1998 when we made that. It was 1999 when it transmitted. Someone would have done it. Let's be honest. It's like there was a rising voice of gay writers and queer writers. That show was always on its way. I thank God that we made what we made, and it went around the world. That was an extraordinary time for me. It was mad, but very, very lovely. And I know will be my legacy. I know I'll be talking about it until the day that I'll probably be written on my gravestone, which is a very funny gravestone to have. I'll have that. I really don't mind. And it's been a delight, the fact that it was picked up in America and became its own success over there on Showtime with that lovely cast. I never look back on Queer as Folk and think anything bad. It was entirely happy. It was a glorious time, and it was such a fuss. One of my favorite things is that in the office we've got a gold disc. The soundtrack sold so many copies. We went to #1, and we've got a gold disc on the wall. It's like you can win all the awards you like. You can have all the Emmys you want. I love having a gold disc. It's my absolute favorite thing because that's how popular it was. The soundtrack went to #1. Happy days. So love that show. Absolutely love it.
Did I read that there's a Queer as Folk France in the works?
There's always someone trying to. I think that's died now. I think.
Okay. It was on IMDb. So
yeah, no, someone in America's trying to make a new version. It's like with our goodwill. Not me. A very great writer actually. I hope it works. But it's the kind of thing you can reboot and engage it with modern queer politics and modern queer life. To make the focus much wider. Yeah, it's kind of dying to be done. Not for me. I've done it
Okay,
once, and I'm busy doing new things like this, but I hope someone does. Yeah.
sure. Here's another question I'm sure you've been asked 18,000 times, but why does Doctor Who have so many gay fans?
Isn't that strange? Isn't that strange? I become an amateur psychologist now. I think there's something of the other about him. I think if you contrast it with Star Trek, and Star Wars, but with Star, I mean, they're very straight worlds, those ones, and especially Star Trek is the authority, it's the Federation, it's practically the military. I get told off when I call it the military. Star Trek friends of mine say it's not the military. It is to me. It's the Navy. It's a ship. It's called the captain. It's the Navy, and that's not. That to me, that never was attractive to me as a child. I finally learned to love Star Trek with Star Trek Discovery, which has literally converted me, and I adore that show. I adore it. I've always liked it. I think it's a great show. But in contrast, Doctor Who is a loner and more eccentric and more unknown, and certainly isn't the military. He doesn't answer, or she now doesn't answer to anyone. They have their own freedom. It's a great gay life in many ways. So I just think it's a show whose spirit is more free. It has a greater freedom. It has a greater life. And I think maybe when you're young, that's how you want your gay life to be, not the establishment, not the authorities, not the Navy. Although I'm quite sure a nice gay time can be had in the Navy. But that's a different matter altogether. Let's not get into that.
I wanted to close with one more question. I mean, the cast of It's a Sin is made up of gay actors. And first of all, thank you for that. Obviously, you're certainly aware of the controversy right now about straight actors taking on LGBT roles. Why do you think it's so important for gay actors to play these gay roles?
I think it brings something new to the screen. It's my job to make things new, and my job not to make a drama in the way that I made a drama 20 years ago. It's my job to make a drama not in the way I made it 1 year ago. And right now, there's this rising openness, this queerness, this freedom. It's interesting because it's like, it's like I could talk about this forever, and you couldn't beat me. I'm very clear on this. It's like, for example, I know full well that it's illegal to ask whether an actor is gay or not. That's a very fine employment law. It's illegal in this country as well. It's like, that's what protects workers in all sorts of settings. So what we do is create an openly free and open queer space where we say, we say to agents, we say to actors, if you want to be out, if you want to be queer, we'd love to meet you, come on audition. And that means you have you don't just have gay actors walking in, you have out gay actors walking in who are the next generation, frankly. That's why I think there's an energy and a buzz rising off this screen. And for anyone who says, why does that mean gay actors can't play straight actors? I never said that. I've never said that. Of course we can. And they do in It's a Sin. We have lots of gay actors also in the straight parts because frankly, from the age of 11, we're studying straight people and making sure we fit in with them. We know straight people better than anyone. We have to mirror them and mimic them and fit in with them every day of our lives. So we know exactly what that's about, and it holds no mysteries for us, and which in a way that no straight 11-year-old ever has to consider fitting in with the gays, ever has to play gay in order to fit in. It doesn't exist as an opposite. People always like straight gay, they always talk straight gay. You listen to the arguments as though it's a 50-50 seesaw. It's not 50-50. It's massively weighted down on the straight side. We can't move the seesaw. We can't move it. It's not shifting. So this is part of shifting it. So we get at least someone equal. Not even close yet, but we're getting there.
Jim, thanks so much. It's a Sin premieres February the 18th on HBO Max. It's extraordinary. Russell, thank you so very much for the series, and thanks so much for all that you've done throughout your career.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good day.